Hello, good evening, and welcome to our panel discussion webinar on moving from a school to a university amidst COVID-19. I hope you're all at home, safe, and healthy. For those of you who are in school and are participating in this webinar, we know that the shift from a school to a university environment can be tough at the best of times. But this year, we have the additional challenge of a global pandemic. To discuss these challenges that students and higher education institutions are facing during this crisis, and hopefully to offer you some words of advice, I have with me our panelists, Professor Padmanabha Ramanujan, also known as Paddy, Dr. Ashton Fernandez, and Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar. By way of brief introduction, Professor Padmanabha Ramanujan is the Chief Knowledge Officer at QS iGauge. He holds a bachelor degree in law from University Law College, Bangalore University, an LLM degree in intellectual property rights from the University of East Anglia. He was awarded the Distinguished Asia Link Fellowship, sponsored by the European Union and the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore. Prior to joining QS iGauge, he also held leadership positions in Padmanabha University, Oro University, and OP Jindal Global University. Dr. Ashton Fernandez is a regional director, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia, QS Cocorelli Simons, and CEO of QS iGauge Rating. In his current role as regional director, he works very closely with universities in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia to support universities and higher education institutions in their quest for excellence and capacity building. Ashwin was instrumental in establishing the framework for QS iGauge, India's first nationwide higher education rating system for colleges and universities. He has a PhD in branding and academic reputation in university rankings, along with a Master's of Business Administration in marketing and a Bachelor of Commerce in financial accounting, auditing, and taxation. Welcome to you both, Paddy and Ashwin. Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar is the founding Vice Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University and has academic qualifications from the University of Oxford, Harvard University, University of Hong Kong, University of Delhi, and Loyola College. Professor Kumar was awarded the Rhodes Scholarship at the University of Oxford, where he obtained his Bachelor of Civil Law, a Landon Gammon Fellowship at Harvard Law School, where he obtained his Master of Law degree, and the James Sovereign Gallo Memorial Scholarship at Harvard University. He received the Doctor of Legal Science from the University of Hong Kong, and with the philanthropic support of Mr. Naveen Jindal, Professor Kumar established JGU in Sonipat, Haryana in 2009. JGU is one of only 20 universities in India and the only non-STEM university which has been declared as an institution of eminence by the Government of India. I'd like to bid a warm welcome to all three of our panelists and a warm welcome to all of our attendees. I hope you will find the next hour and a half very, very informative. Let me start by asking the first question to Professor Paddy. Paddy, recently QS iGauge released an exclusive report titled COVID-19, a second wind for Indian higher education. I'm given to understand that QS has done extensive research on the effect of this pandemic on the higher education system. Could you tell us a little bit more about this report and your findings?
Thank you so much, Arju, for that question. We are at a crisis, and QS iGauge was, studying this crisis, and we wanted to actually get something out which could be actually useful for students. So we started understanding, what could be actually running through the minds of students and parents. And Indian students I've always considered studying abroad. And we wanted to understand whether COVID has an impact in the minds of the students, given the fact of the pandemic situation that we are in. So we started the research, and I had a small PPT to present to the parents and the students, the kind of intensive research that we actually did. The second slide, if you look at, gives a very interesting situation that why we are seriously seeing this as a crisis. It's not that the world did not see any other viruses. We did have a pandemic situation when we went through SARS. We did have a pandemic situation when we went through MERS. But what is so unique about COVID? When we studied the various reports and publications that actually did exist, COVID had impacted many countries which and it had it had touched many countries, and which no other virus or no other infection previously did. It challenged two important factors, which was very responsive, which was very unique for education. One was mobility is really important. Students want to move from one state to another state, from one country to another country. So it really hit that the core idea on which education itself is grounded. One was mobility. The second was social distancing. So these two factors were very unique with the infection itself, COVID. And when you look at the studies that have been done, it is very interesting to see that many countries, many students who wanted to study in different countries are now finding it as a great challenge, even to continue their choices of study in terms of destination, or even to completely change their destination in terms of higher education. The QS study is very interesting. QS Global did 3 surveys. The survey in the month of February revealed that 24% of the students, decision was impacted about going abroad and studying. And then there was a series of survey with a gap of 15 days, showed that the number only increased considerably. The last survey is very unique because we were not wanting to know impact, but we also wanted to see if there is a change in decision. And the survey very clearly revealed that the students' decision is now being changed. So this led to a very interesting further analysis that if this decision is changed, these students would be looking at options in India, right? Good higher education options in India, right? So that led to a good conjecture that if students are not going to be going abroad, one, either they will be deferring the admissions, two, they will be considering good options in India. So this entire report is for students and parents to give them an understanding that if they were deciding about going abroad, and if that decision is changed, how now they can go out and make that unique decision of joining a university. So we have identified in our last slide that parents should consider these factors, which could help students and parents to make that decision when they choose an higher education option in India, which are rating, ranking, and they also need to really understand whether institutions have the infrastructure. Today, many institutions are going online. You can't just choose institutions. You have to take a decision based on what kind of infrastructure these institutions have, what kind of validation these institutions have. So these were some of the, I would say, outcomings of this report. This report is available for download, and I encourage students and parents to go ahead and read this report in detail. Thank you so much for asking that question.
Right. Thank you so much, Paddy. It's interesting how quickly opinions have shifted between the 26th of February and the 5th of March, the 2 dates when you did these 2 surveys. I want to very quickly move over to Dr. Ashton Fernandez. Ashwin, you've been engaging with universities across the world, and particularly in South Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa for quite a while now. While Paddy talked to us about the trends and opinions of Indian students and parents, what are the trends that you're beginning to see in terms of reactions and preparedness, internationally in terms of this global pandemic?
Yeah, thank you so much, Arya, for that question, and it's a pleasure for me to be representing QS globally here for you all in India. And I think there is so much data QS has collected over the last 3 months. And let me share my screen to actually substantiate what I've been saying. So this is the report we have just published globally. It's the impact of the coronavirus on global higher education. So our mission, again at QS, and I would like to reiterate, that is to enable motivated people around the world to fulfill their potential by fostering international mobility, educational achievement, and career development. The number of students and universities which we work with are tremendously large in number. So the kind of data we collect across our world ranking, across the reports we produce, across our social media channels is tremendous. So when we ran this global survey and we interviewed 11,000 students from around the world, we actually see that 46% of students have been impacted. Their study plans to study abroad have been impacted. There is about 25% who still don't know, and this was as latest as last month, and 29% actually have said no. When we looked at different times, so we ran this survey starting in February one time, then we again ran it again in February, then in March, and then in late March, and we can see the impact as the virus has started to hit countries, as some of the biggest higher education destinations, which include the UK and the United States, have been hit hard over the last month. We can see the yes actually increasing across the destinations which we are looking at, and across the students who are saying that, well, it has impacted our decision to study abroad. We also asked the students a question about what are they going to do now that the study abroad option doesn't seem to be possible. And 47% of the respondents said that they're going to defer their entry until next year. We have about 8% which say that they no longer want to study abroad. Now, this, when you look on a global scale, has the potential to support higher education across the countries they're coming from as well. So that is a thing which I think universities like OP Jindal can offer to students, are options to absorb these students into the system by still offering an international-like education. We have 13% that now say that they intend to study in a different country. And we can again see that these decisions have actually spiraled up over a period of time. So from 14th of February, those who are wanting to defer their entry has increased over the last few weeks. We can see those that didn't intend to study in a foreign destination actually are actually less intending now to do that. And those that actually very recently no longer want to study abroad have actually reduced. So that is a bit strange because in the last report, when we expected students to no longer want to go to study abroad, actually, while they are impacted, they would like to do it perhaps in the future. But there are several statements we have here from various students who have been impacted with the study abroad. Again, the lure of going abroad wouldn't go away so easily. Well, most of them want to postpone this to the future. So some of the statements here is that COVID-19 has spread across the world, so airlines have stopped, the families are scared. Another student is saying that I'm scared of going abroad nowadays. The world is going to face an economic collapse. And when we look at the global rankings, and when we looked at some of the methodology there, especially in QS, employability was one of the most important factors why students wanted to go abroad, for better economic prospects. So this is an interesting thing which I have here, which says, so education would definitely become costly. It would be unbearable for a middle-class family. And these are global responses we have received. Also, these are some of the news pieces I've picked up in the last few weeks. Australia being the recent one, and we probably know that there are approximately, I can't remember the exact number, but there is a huge number of the 800,000 students, the 8 lakh students we study abroad. A substantial number in Australia, and the Australian Prime Minister says, well, it's time to go home for visitors and including international students. Students in the United States have been asked to go home without any option. They're jobless and stranded in some countries. So the world hasn't seen anything like this before, and universities globally are not prepared to the response they should have for this. So, well, at the moment, it is just a wait and watch situation for students, for parents, and I think as they defer the program, so next year There are going to be questions coming up in the next few weeks and months, and it will start to unfold at that time. But at the moment, it is a bit of a chaotic situation. But as Paddy explained earlier, it is the second win for Indian higher education, because we can see Indian institutions ramping up their efforts and offering some world-class degree programs to these students who would like to stay back in India. So that's it with my presentation, and I'll be happy to take questions post this.
Well, thank you very much, Ashwin. I think there seems to be, a common theme underlying both the surveys that Paddy talked about and that you talked about, in the sense that in both scenarios, both in India and globally, students are beginning to feel that they have been impacted by this global pandemic, and that a majority of students will want to defer their studies to the next year in the hope that all of this blows over and it's business as usual. But it seems that a significant number of people would want to stay back in their home country or would want to shift to another country. And that seems to be the common theme between both the Indian and the international survey. I now turn to Professor Raj. Raj, you've been the founding vice chancellor of what is arguably one of India's leading private universities. How should Indian universities react, or how should they ramp up their preparations, as Ashwin pointed out?
Right. First of all, I want to say that all the parents and students who are watching this program, I would like you to assure you that we will indeed overcome this global pandemic. The history and evolution of pandemics, all the way from smallpox to SARS to MERS to Ebola, the global community and consciousness has risen up. And I think as we speak, scientists around the world, including in India, are working hard to ensure that we successfully overcome this pandemic. So while this, relative uncertainty and arguably a gloomy environment that the world is facing today does, allow us to pause for a moment and see what we should be doing. For the young people who are watching this program, I want you to, be confident about the future. And the worst case scenario we are looking at is an 18 to 24 month time period for vaccines to be found, and then of course a few more years for the human population to be vaccinated. It's not just me saying this. I invite you to watch a fantastic program by Bill Gates in the daily social distancing show with Trevor Noah a few days ago, in which he said this, and there have been numerous articles about it. So I want you to feel confident about it. Having said that, I think it's an extraordinary situation that we are facing today, not just in India, but around the world. All over the world, universities are in a huge dilemma as to how this pandemic has created a very unplanned scenario for their future. While we can speak about what's happening in different countries, and Ashwin and Paddy talked about the different responses in Australia and United States and UK and others, one universal pattern that is emerging is that countries are being forced to make choices in their own countries and in education institutions in different countries vis-a-vis their domestic students and international students. A very difficult moral choice that has been put in, and their priorities have been universally those students and people who belong to their own society, their own country. So this has in fact created a very unfortunate situation where many students who are, many Indian students and students from around the world who are studying in these countries, their education have been abruptly paused, and many implications have been brought in. Now, this of course creates a very important opportunity, and that's both the reports that QS had published with regard to the Indian situation and international situation reinforces the fact that Indian universities are now uniquely positioned to make a very important choice and preparedness as to what it can offer to our own students. I've always believed, and not only due to COVID, but even before, that it is important for students in India to pursue higher education at the first level, particularly undergraduate programs in India, and to be able to experience international education through what I call study abroad programs, student exchange programs, and dual degree programs, but to ultimately pursue graduate education as they think about it. This is an opportunity and even a responsibility for Indian universities, particularly the good ones, which have a vision to promote international education, which have a vision to establish partnership and to attract the best minds in their faculty to be able to give an opportunity for the finest Indian students to pursue education in their institutions. Having said that, it's important for these institutions to prepare themselves and to create a new imagination, because what we are otherwise used to, which is brick and mortar campuses, but also physically enabling the student learning experience, including the pedagogical foundations on the basis of which education is offered, need to be tweaked, particularly in the light of this scenario. And I do believe that some universities in India are better prepared to handle this response than many others. And I would like to say that as Vice Chancellor of OPT Global University, we are deeply engaged with this phenomenon so that we can offer the best of the learning experience for our students, both the ones who are currently enrolled and the ones which are going to join us in the fall semester.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for those opening remarks, gentlemen. I now have a number of questions for each of you, and for those of you who are listening in or watching us, feel free to ask questions. You see a small tab called questions on your sidebar. My first question is to Paddy. Paddy, I'm going to go back to your survey of Indian students. There's a large number of Indian students, close to 200,000 each year, who go abroad for higher studies. And this is possibly due to the perception that universities in certain countries have a better quality of teaching and learning than, let's say, Indian universities. So now that there are concerns about visas as well as health and safety concerns, you mentioned that students are either deferring to study abroad for a year, or that they are moving from one country to another, perhaps even back to their home country. What would be your advice to them? For perhaps a student who's seeking postgraduate higher education, it might make sense to defer that postgraduate degree by a year if they are employed. But what about students who are in high school, who've been looking forward to moving abroad for higher studies? Would it be wise for them to defer a year, or should they be shifting to another country, or looking to come back to, or looking to remain in India?
You know, these are uncertain times. You know, uncertain times need bold decisions to make, because nobody can predict how long this mobility is going to be affected, and what will be the future like in terms of for education abroad. There are very interesting studies that are coming out. Like for example, how Harvard Business School is forced to move this semester completely online. It is also very interesting. It is very also important for students to know that many a time when you pick a country or you pick a university, you're going for a experience. So you need to ask yourself, what is that experience is going to be like, when you go during these times. That's one thing which you need to keep in mind. The second thing that you need to keep in mind is, coronavirus is not just going to go away and out, of our lives very soon. It is something. It's like a cold. It is like a virus. It will, the second, as we speak, Singapore and Japan have witnessed the second wave of cases of those patients who are cured. So it is going to keep coming back. And lockdown is something that we need to live with now. It's not that once this phase goes out, that we will not foresee any lockdown. So students need to take all these things into consideration. I would say uncertain times need bold decision. I think the bold decision that they need to make is to, choose an option in India and carefully see how the situation, is prolonging. I think that will help them to, refocus, to focus on their studies and then plan their masters abroad. I think there's a justification to start thinking on those lines. Given the fact of, the uncertainty that is connected with two most important factors of education. One is mobility, the other one is social distancing. Social distancing is very important to fight COVID-19, and mobility is what actually encourages students to move from one destination to another destination. So COVID-19 is throwing two very important challenges, and under these circumstances, I would say that students need to realign, reassess their decision, and take a bold decision of choosing better options in India. And definitely they can at some point of time go and enjoy their post graduation abroad. By that time, hopefully, the situation will not be as bad as what we are going to experience in months to come.
Right, right. Well, thank you, Paddy. It's interesting that Bill Gates in 2015 actually raised this issue that the next big problem for humanity is not going to be a nuclear war, but a series of global pandemics. We're going through one ourselves right now. But you mentioned that students should look to remain or should look inwards towards India. I now turn towards Ashwin. Ashwin, just moving on from Paddy's point that students should look towards Indian universities, and you've been involved with the QS World University Rankings, which is used worldwide by students and relied on by millions of students, as I understand. What should be the factors that Indian students should be looking at when choosing a university? Now, I'm going to ask you this in two parts. Should there be different factors when you're looking at universities in India and abroad, or should the factors be the same?
Great question there. And first, as I would say, you should be looking at what you really wanted when you went abroad. And if it was employability, it was more experience, it was to get out of family, to experience life. And interestingly, different students have got different likes and dislikes and what they would like to do. Our next report, which we are coming out with, actually probe students on what is that is most important for them when they would like to go abroad. And the single most important thing after the global pandemic was safety, followed by employability. So if it is for employability, then you have several options for you which are available in India. And I think you shouldn't lower your bar if you're looking for institutions in India. I think many universities in India have great employability, but the unexpected times, the global pandemic has brought even some of the best institutions in India, and the offers being made to the students were withdrawn recently. So if it is purely based on employability, then you wouldn't, and I think there's a caution there that you would face almost the same kind of situation you would face abroad, and in India would be exactly the same. But what you should look at here are definitely, one of them are global rankings. And when I say global rankings, I mean reputed global rankings, QS being one of them. You should probably start by looking at the World University Ranking and seeing and shortlisting which of the universities are closest to you. Then, based on your subject interest, you should then start looking at the QS subject rankings or the other available international subjects, because you would like to get the best institution in a particular subject. Then you should be looking at any international accreditations they have and any international ratings they have received. So one of the international rating is the QS stars rating, which we have in across the world, and the other for India specifically. And I think we kind of guessed many years ago and had the feel that India does require its own evaluation system run independently by international experts. So QS iGauge was born at that time. So QS iGauge gives a much detailed report of an institutional performance beyond just a rank. It tells you how the facilities are. I mean, international students, when they would like to go, when looking for international universities, they also would like to know whether they have a good sporting facility, they have good dormitories, how is the safety on campus. So all of that is also measured in the QSI gauge rating. So I would say students shouldn't lower your bar at all while looking at universities. Look at international parameters, look at international indicators, and start to select these institutions, but don't just stop there. I think you should also start questioning these institutions, talking to them, asking them their past records. And I think if they're able to convince you, and it also would, and as my co-panelist said, this pandemic is not going to go away so soon. And you've seen how international countries have closed doors on students, leaving them high and dry. So I think now, in my personal advice, I'm Indian at heart. I think I wouldn't want my any of my kids to go and study in a country and get stranded there. Canada at the moment is looking at how they can give money to international students as they would give to unemployed people. So that is not what you would want at this time. So there are several options available in India, in South Asia for that matter. So look at rankings, look at ratings, look at all the information you have, and then make an informed decision based on what you have found in these available rankings, ratings, and information services.
Well, thank you so much, Ashwin. So you're suggesting that we look at not just rankings but ratings as well, and look at different parameters for these universities that you're selecting and take a holistic decision, right? One. All right. So that does make a lot of sense. Raj, I want to turn to you now, and slightly off. We're going to go on to the next sort of a broad area of this discussion today, and I see a number of questions that echo this question that I have had over the last month or so. Now, over the last couple of months, most universities across the world have adopted a digital mode of delivering classes. Now, you've been an educator for so many years, and you've taught, and I know that Patty's taught for so many years. Do you feel that online learning and in-class learning can be replicated? Are they the same? Is the experience the same? And if so, if not, then what can we do to online learning? Because that's what we have right now. What can we do for online learning to make it more engaging as physical in-class learning?
Well, I've always, listen, it's not the time when first time this issue of online learning is coming into our discussions. I mean, several years ago, we had a broader discussion. There were wild predictions that MOOCs is going to dramatically change the way we look at education. There were predictions that the brick and mortar campuses that we see today may not even exist, and also Coursera and Khan Academy and edX and all these online platforms that emerged in the last decade, and they have provided some important value to it. So I firmly believe that online education and education through online platforms do have a very important space, even a very significant space in the larger objective of education. Having said that, it's also important to recognize that the best of online education, at least in the undergraduate context, cannot substitute what happens in a physical campus environment. At the same time, it's also equally important to recognize that, as it was mentioned, extraordinary situations and extraordinary circumstances will require us to also take unprecedented decisions. And so today, what universities around the world, including some of the good Indian universities, are preparing itself for is that to what extent this change scenario that we are facing, where our pedagogical foundations of small classroom learning, where experiential learning is possible, where exchanges between students and faculty happens in a classroom setting, to small group tutorial systems, peer group learning that happens through discussion within class, all these things may not happen the way we have always envisaged education. And hence, it's important for us to reimagine the way we have conceived the classroom. And that's where online education needs to move. We need to look at online education in ways that we have not thought through before. we need to figure out, in addition to what is possible in a classroom environment, what kind of materials that can be provided, what kind of discussion groups can be created, what kind of webinars is possible. Just imagine what we are doing today. This may not have been needed in a environment where we didn't have to face what we are facing today. So in addition to the interaction that might happen in a classroom setting between the student and the teacher, the online learning should actually expand its own vistas to offer a wider range of opportunities. I gather that universities such as ours are already preparing itself in that direction. And as I said before, it may not be a preferred approach towards learning, but if there is no other option, it's important for universities in India to assume leadership and responsibility towards offering an equally important but an equally fulfilling experience through online education. The second thing I would say is that I would like to understate the discussion that we're having, which is about the fact that online education, or for that matter, education in India, should not be seen to be, let's say, a less attractive proposition. It should not be a consolation prize. Bright Indian students should recognize that an opportunity to pursue their undergrad education in particular, maybe even graduate education in India, should empower them to pursue a wide range of options and opportunities in the future. COVID might just provide a current reasoning for the decision, but it is important that the best of Indian institutions need to stand up to that challenge to provide world-class education. And that's where organizations like QS and the QS rankings could provide pointers to students when they make those informed choices as to where they want to study. It's also equally important that students need to recognize a lot of learning also needs to be made through students taking responsibility. It's also about students recognizing that this is an opportunity for them to also take responsibility in the learning project, and the learning project becomes a collaborative project between the students on the one hand and the faculty on the other. It's also equally important that one of the consequences of this COVID is for us to recognize that world is going through a difficult phase, and each of us have to make our own contribution. And many a time I do see young people at times feeling bad about the fact that their internship is being affected, that one particular program that they wanted to, a summer program that they wanted to have been affected, or something that they wanted to do with their friends have been affected. But let's recognize that those are not the most important things. Today, a UN report has talked about the fact that through the lockdown and the COVID, 400 million Indians are going to be getting into poverty. And such is the risks and vulnerability associated with this disease that there are large number of people who are already poor, marginalized, downtrodden, and vulnerable. Are their levels of poverty and their vulnerability is going to be exacerbated due to the COVID crisis. It's important for all of us to recognize that we are privileged. We are privileged at multiple levels. We are privileged to have received good education. And I say not just us, but the students who are watching this show. We are privileged that we even have options to consider within India, and to be able to go to some of the best institutions and to make the best use of the time that we have, because this is a unique moment in humanity when, just as the 1918 flu took over the entire world, we are facing a similar type of pandemic as opposed to what we did face during SARS or MERS, or for that matter Ebola, when certain pockets of the world were affected. So it's also character building for students. It's also for students to recognize that how do they prepare for an extraordinary situation where they are already privileged, and to be able to be grateful about some of the privileges that they have got because of their parents, their family, their own social and economic situation, and to recognize that a lot of their peers are simply deprived of an opportunity, let alone to have a meal properly, forget having an education. All these things become important during this time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Raj. I now have a question for the entire panel, and then we'll start taking some questions that our viewers have been asking. The Ministry of Higher of Human Resource Development, they've been making a number of rapid policy changes, starting from, and perhaps keeping in mind the health and safety of students who would have been appearing for exams in the month of March and April. For example, the CBSE board exams have been delayed. A number of CBSE papers, the final exams for class 12 will not be held. Where do you see this going? I mean, do you consider, what should the government be doing next in terms of the higher education scenario, particularly for class 12 students? And this I'm opening to the entire panel, whoever wishes to answer.
As an educator and as somebody who is heading a university, let me quickly say that it's a difficult time for the government and also regulatory bodies. The very important balancing act today is that to what extent countries and policy making bodies can, and schools and colleges and universities can maintain their deeper commitment towards academic standards on the one hand, and to what extent they can create a fair and reasonable and enabling environment for students to be able to pursue their education. So to begin with, I will say that flexibility is the norm. It's absolutely important for universities, colleges, schools, and even regulatory bodies, including board examination bodies, to embrace all forms of flexibility that will enable students to be able to overcome the situation that we are currently facing. We need to be creative. We need to be innovative in approaching this problem. The solutions that we normally adopt when it comes to a scenario like this may not be applicable for what we are facing. In fact, we need to be proactive. Mere postponement of exams from one week to the other or the following week is not going to address it. In fact, we need to seriously consider the possibility at some levels of online examinations. We need to look at to what extent remote proctoring can actually be used for certain type of assessment and examination processes. In fact, at our university, there has been a very active debate. I've had several meetings with our senior management, including the joint deans meeting, and the deans of all schools of our university have been seriously looking at it. We have an Office of Academic Planning and Interdisciplinarity and Coordination, which is spearheading this task with the Controller of Examination and the Office of the Registrar as to how do we prepare our existing students so that they can successfully complete the current semester that was interrupted, and also to be able to have the final year students to be able to graduate successfully to the ones who do well in their examinations. But from our standpoint, we are recognizing the unique situation that we are in, and the norm that we've adopted is to keep the overarching paramount interest of the students so that we can all come out of this successfully. So my own suggestion is that as we speak, we need to look at the boards, how they can offer greater flexibility so that we can overcome the current crisis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Raj. There have been a number of, so I've been looking at the questions that have come up. There have been a number of questions that are quite similar. And I think the question on everybody's mind is, when do you think we can start the 2020 academic year? Is it going to start as business as usual in August and September, or do you think it's going to be delayed further? That's the question on a lot of people's minds, as I've seen over the last 45 minutes or so. Any takers for that question?
The question, but I'll invite Ashwin and Paddy if they want to respond, and I'll be happy to take that question after they respond.
Yeah, so I think this is the question I'm being asked literally every day by a lot of institutions is, when do you expect this to start? But I think the way the situation has been evolving every day, I mean, the question I have is, when do we start office next week? If in India we do start office, and we still don't have the answer. The situation with the pandemic is changing. I mean, US, as you know, had 200 cases in February. A month later, they had 500,000. So we still don't know, and I don't think we have the answers. But as Raj mentioned, I think it all depends now how soon and what does the government take an action. Whether we do online examinations, we get the students through this phase. Do we start the next phase online? Perhaps we might not start the next academic year in the university. It might be online. Are the universities geared for this? What is going to be and how that is going to transform the whole face of higher education, not just in India but across the world. And I think another report which we did, and we probably will circulate to the audience later, is titled "E-versity in Times of Adversity." So it looks at different models. So Paddy has written this wonderful report, looked at different models. Universities like Harvard, companies like the BBC, organizations like UNESCO have all adopted the E method, including geotagging exams for various purposes. So I understand the current UGC committee, which has been put in place, deliberating on what is to be done. And my recommendation to them was that they should be looking at this report and see how things could be done online. But I think the challenge in India is the infrastructure, the connectivity. The last mile connectivity in India is not great. So that is going to be a hurdle in this. But I think we will probably start getting answers to all these questions by May sometime, when we kind of are just over the curve in India. So let's hope, and I don't think I have a straightforward answer to that. Perhaps Paddy would like to.
Let me just reflect, on this. Thank you so much, Arjun, for this question. And I think also for the students who are asking this question. I think, we also need to know that in India, there are more than 900 universities and 40,000 colleges, right? So this COVID, nobody was prepared to face a situation like COVID. Not all institutions have an inbuilt capacity of an infrastructure to cater to online education in that scale. So the lockdown is really having an effect on the institutions. And one of the important adjustments which I feel that the Ministry of HRD or the government should do is to see how this academic calendar could be reshifted or realigned to make sure that students are starting late to get sufficient time to finish their portions. Institutions which have the capacity, we are really not discussing about those institutions because they are anyway continuing with the online learning platforms. But having said that, it's not all universities and all colleges have the same infrastructure and inbuilt capacity, right? So what I strongly would feel that it could take, we are very closely watching the kind of numbers that are significantly increasing in India. Things are not actually getting better. We have to see how things go in the next 2 to 4 weeks. I think that would help us in assessing and reassessing the situation. But one of the bold decisions that the government needs to really make is we have not completed with our class 12 exams, which means to say that the students potentially cannot write any of the entrance exams. So all this needs is only going to push the possibility of opening the next semester a little late, which also means that the academic calendar needs to be readjusted so that the class 11 students who are moving to class 12, they get the sufficient time to finish their portions and appear for their exams. So I think next 1 or 2 years you would see a different kind of an academic calendar functioning, and I think and it will get adjusted as the COVID situation gets faded. So we should be prepared to readjust our academic calendar. We should be prepared to readjust the entrance exam mechanism. I was reading a very interesting article, and and I also wanted to tell the audience how people are innovating at these times. One of the exams which students in US have to write to get into a law school is an LSAT exam. And traditionally, LSAT has been a paper and book exam, and now it is a digital exam, but all the students need to go into a test center to write the exam on a specified date. And this has put huge, they had to cancel series of LSAT exams, which only helped GRE to take the exams to the home where the student is. And therefore, all of the students are shifting into an examination pattern, which is helping them to readjust their, idea of, accessibility. So I think it is also important for institutions which are organizing entrance exam to revisit their traditional modes of, administering the exam. Because everybody needs to create and innovate at this time. Every model which was working in F2F, face-to-face, needs to be realigned and revisited and reinvented. And I think this also, is a creative phase, because not all problems you find solutions, by just locking down. So locking down is only prolonging the problem. It is not creating actually solutions to the problem, right? So you need to really reinvent, create. You need to readjust. I think you also need to see if entrance exams are not going to be possible in F2F model, how you can digitize and take the exams to the students. So the next few months is going to be a very creative phase and a testing time for all stakeholders, be it students, parents, institutions which run the entrance exam, and universities. And I think the people who tend to create and invent will find a lot of success.
Right. Thank you very much, all three of you, for this.
I just want to add one important thing from the discussion. It's important for us to get the facts right so that we can have a better informed decisions about how do we respond to it. Today, United States has got the highest number of deaths. Over 2,000 people have died in the United States on Friday, which is our Saturday in that sense. That's the highest in the entire journey. In fact, their deaths have just crossed 18,000, which is the deaths of Italy as well. And secondly, if you look at India, for example, India has also got the highest single day number of cases today, over 1,000 cases of COVID-19, and our deaths are, of course, nearly 250. So the first principle here is, let us not create an artificial deadline. I remember very famously, Dr. Fauci of the United States said that the virus will decide the schedule and not us. So we should, first of all, and it's important, and the WHO advisor, to WHO, Dr. Navarro said that respect this virus. So having said those two things, it's important for us to recognize how do we move forward. And I have 5 basic principles on the basis of which we should move forward as education institutions. First, it's important for universities, colleges, and schools in particular to have clarity as to what its own approach and strategy is. So to develop internal clarity as to how it wants to respond to the situation. Most of the time, many institutions suffer from that. So first is clarity. Second is communication. Once clarity is established as to what it needs to do, the second is to be able to communicate to all its stakeholders as to what kind of strategy and approach it will adopt when it comes to dealing with this crisis. The third very important principle is to have flexibility. I talked about flexibility before, and I'll give you an example of flexibility. For example, entrance examination results are not going to be available from the students now. It's important for university to adopt what is known as provisional offer of admissions to be able to admit students on the basis of whatever results they already have. And then to confirm that admission at appropriate time, they can actually take the entrance exam. So the third principle is flexibility in relation to student. The fourth important principle is, quality. It's absolutely critical that the education that we offer in universities, colleges, and schools should not suffer from significant quality deficits. And so, if it needs to ramp up its online learning experience, if it needs to create innovative mechanisms in the form of adding webinars to its approach towards learning, it needs to do it. So you have clarity, communication, flexibility, quality, and the fifth, and in my view, a very important principle is to have safety and and security of the students concerned. It's important. Campuses in particular are preparing itself. As we know, the COVID crisis is not going to end anytime soon. It might take several months or more. And so the question is, to what extent residential campuses, even non-residential campuses, are able to provide infrastructure, health center facilities, and even ecosystem within the campus that will ensure the safety and well-being of students. Once you take care of these 5 principles, which is clarity, communication, flexibility, quality, and safety, we will be better positioned to address the problem of COVID-19 vis-a-vis students and parents who are deeply concerned and anguished about their future.
Right. Well, thank you very much, all 3 of you. I'm taking a few questions together. For example, a lot of people are asking if the final exams haven't been scheduled yet. We don't have our final results. On what basis can we take admission in universities across India? Exactly what you were proposing, Raj. I have a few specific questions. For example, Arnav Goilani says, how is the admissions process for universities in India and JGU in particular going to be affected, especially considering that CBSE exams and other boards, CBSE exams have been delayed and other boards have been cancelled? Another related question is to Professor Rajkumar. What is the current decision regarding JGU's admission process and provision of admissions? Again, in a similar vein, Harshita Chaudhary asks, since the examinations haven't been conducted, on what basis do students get admissions? Now, Raj, you briefly alluded to this provisional offer of admission. Would you like to elucidate a little bit more on that and the adjustments that JGU has made?
In fact, this is again a tectonic shift in the mindset of people in India. We need to definitely proceed with that change. For all admissions to universities abroad, Indian students apply when they are in their beginning of the 12th standard, and the international admissions, including to Harvard and Yale and Stanford and Oxford and Cambridge, all these admissions, the decisions end up coming before the board exams. In fact, they use the predicted results as the framework and the qualifying examination in the form of a SAT or ACT or other such exams to actually give offer of admission. It's time for us to reimagine our own approach towards some of these examinations and address. Having said that, as far as JGU is concerned, we have immediately formulated a policy and a framework of how we will address this issue. We have already begun to offer admissions, what we call provisional offer of admissions, on the basis of a transparent selection process that each of our schools of the university have for their respective programs, and use this opportunity to recognize that this provisional offer of admission will be subject to a condition that they will successfully have completed their examinations, their 12th standard examinations or their undergraduate degree examinations. As I said before, exceptional situations require creative solutions, and that's where we have provided some leadership.
Wonderful. I have a very pertinent question related to this, Raj. Devansh Murmuria asks, are you guys planning to give provisional admission to law students as well?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Both our law school and our architecture school are regulated by the Bar Council of India. And so when it comes to those degree programs, particularly the 5-year BA LLB, the 5-year BBA LLB, and the 3-year LLB, which are all degree programs which are regulated by the Bar Council of India for admission to become a lawyer, we will have to adhere to those norms and conditions, and we will wait for the LSAT results as well as, of course, the high school examinations. The LSAT examination is scheduled for the 7th of June, and after which we will proceed forward. However, the law school offers two other programs, one for the high school students, the BA Honors in Legal Studies, which is the 3-year undergraduate program, and the Master of Laws LLM program, both of which we will be able to offer conditional offers of admission on the basis of selection process that has been outlined.
I see. All right. There are a few questions relating to studying abroad, which I want to pose to Ashwin and Paddy, both of you. Jangan Sai Reddy, I hope I pronounced that correctly. He's got a number of questions relating to studying abroad, particularly in the United States. One of his questions is on, will foreign universities accept applications from Indian students in this terrible situation? And whether there is more scope for employment in the United States than in India, given that we're looking at the deep end of a recession that is looming in the next couple of years. Ashwin?
Yeah, that question from Sai Kiran, right? Sai Reddy, you say?
Sai Reddy, yes.
Sai Reddy, yes. So very good question, Sai Reddy. And I think if I'm looking for employment, I'm definitely not going to be looking at the United States. United States is at the lowest unemployment rate in its history, if I'm not wrong, at least since the financial crisis. So definitely not the US for employment, but all these institutions are in the mode right now of accepting applications from international students for future intake. So definitely they are still looking at markets like India. They would actually welcome students from India as well, considering the other available countries. Actually, all the countries right now, the universities are looking at India very prominently. So definitely, they would give you a provisional offer, or they would give you an offer. I've seen students getting offers in the last few days as well from universities across the world. But again, we can't say when the virus would go away, and if it would go away so soon. People are expecting, or the universities are anticipating, that they would start their educational year sooner, and that's the assumption it is going on. But I think at the moment it's just a wait and watch for all the international students. And I think if you look at the news right now, you open up Google and you type international students in the United States, a lot of them are in limbo. So my personal advice would be, this is not an official statement, my personal advice would be to have a wait and watch for the next few weeks and months, and see how this is going to transform and what's going to happen. But well, it would take a while for things to get back to normal at this time.
Right. Okay. So our next question comes from Sanskriti Ghosh, and I want to pose this question to both Paddy and Raj. We've been talking about provisional offers and conditional offers. So she asks, is it better to take up admission in a university or wait till the end of the lockdown? Because many universities are conducting their admission interviews. So it seems that JGU isn't the only one that's doing provisional offers. So clearly Sanskriti is at a fix here as to which university to say yes to. Paddy or Raj, anyone can take this.
Sanskriti, I will say this. Listen, if you're a high school student, I would like to believe that you will want to enter into a college, into a university. It's not an option for a high school graduate to be able to sit at home for the next year and then to figure out what will happen. I can understand if you're already a graduate degree and you're thinking about doing a postgraduate master's degree, and you can think about a gap year and do other things. But if you've just completed, on the process of completing your 12th standard, and you want to do something about your future, there is no alternative other than to pursue an undergraduate education. Second is that this is, of course, a very important time for you to evaluate universities on the basis of some transparent criteria. It does not matter which university you go, but you might want to adopt the criteria. So I've always suggested, I say this independent of the fact that I head a university. I think there are 5 broad reasons or elements on the basis of which you evaluate the quality of a university. First is the qualification and quality of the faculty members of the university. The most important criteria that you will adopt in determining which university you want to study. Second is the research ecosystem and the research environment that university fosters when it comes to creating opportunities for students to pursue, including the research centers, the publications, and the faculty initiatives in that. The third is the extensive partnerships that a university has in relation to international programs. Listen, as I told you when I started this conversation, we will get to a post-COVID world, and it will happen sooner than later. So all these international partnerships that will enable our students to pursue international programs, including student exchange programs, dual degree programs, short-term study abroad programs, these things are critical. And so you will evaluate this as the state of internationalization prevailing in the university. The fourth is that the kind of programs that the university offers to promote internships and placements and what is known as an effective office of career services that will enable the students to pursue their dreams and aspirations. And the fifth important criteria is that the state of infrastructure in the campus, including its safety and security, but also its contribution towards holistic learning in the form of sports and extracurricular activities and health center and other things. These five criteria should be adopted and applied as you think about where you want to study and which university you want to study in India or abroad.
Just to substantiate what Raj was saying, Arjo, when students choose institutions abroad, they do apply certain criteria, right? It could be employability, it could be reputation, it could be the quality of faculty. I think they could use the same measures to see what kind of institutions are available in India, to reassess the situation of post-COVID, which will help them in understanding that there are such options available in India, right? So Raj is absolutely right when he says that. And also Ashwin was reflecting, when we did a survey very recently to know what is that students are actually looking for, both in India and outside India, safety actually came up, very prominently. And it is important for all of us to note that students applying these criteria could actually come to a very reasonable decision and identify institutions of excellence which are in India and therefore study. I'm not for students taking a gap here, for many reasons. So I think if they are good enough, and if they are looking at institutions abroad with certain set of factors and indicators, I think those indicators would really help them in even selecting an institution in India. And I think that's a better approach to handle a COVID-19 situation than just prolonging this issue any further, because until unless we find a cure for COVID-19, we will have to, COVID-19 is going to be part and parcel of our life, and it is going to be, we're not going to foresee any situations, So I think it's better to plan, knowing that this is going to be there. How will you realign and reassess your decision of studying abroad, and how will you choose your institution, applying the same parameters which you could use while you're choosing institutions abroad.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that, for those responses, both Raj and Paddy. I have a few other questions, this time based on employment. For example, Sumitra Saha asks, how is the pandemic going to affect the MBA graduates in placement? Now, I recall that Ashwin remarked about employability and how the QS graduate employability rankings helps people choose, but we've all seen the 2008-2009 recession. So a lot of questions, there's a lot of uncertainty about what is it going to do for graduates who are going to come out of college or an MBA degree in the next couple of years, smack bang into a recession. So is the pandemic going to affect MBA graduates right now? That's and let the panel answer that question. It's open for anyone.
So let me say this, that you see, pandemic is going to affect everybody. It's one of those, I have elsewhere said that this particular pandemic is going to impact people's lives, but also it's one of those pandemics, which is pretty inclusive. It affects people across the world. Of course, it does affect vulnerable people more and makes their life even more miserable. But when it comes to the students' question, let me quickly say that there is no doubt about the fact that immediate employability of our graduates across universities across the world is going to be affected. Some people have already made announcements to that effect in India and also around the world. But I want to say something, which is that it is also important for us to recognize this pandemic is not going to change the fundamentals of human society. The things that we value in a candidate will continue to be valued in employment settings even now and in the future. It may be possible that companies and corporations and business enterprises who might have made decisions to recruit some people may have to postpone that recruitment, may not be able to afford the same salaries they had said. But let's make no mistake, the qualities of learning, the qualities of collaboration, the qualities of academic rigor, the qualities of knowledge and expertise, all those things that we have always valued in any graduate, including MBA graduates, are not going to change. Yes, it's also a time for us to think about entrepreneurship. In fact, we have always maintained for a while that it is also time for India to think in terms of not just having jobs in the form of people seeking jobs, but also it's important for us to create opportunities for people to engage in entrepreneurship and innovation. Crises of this kind create opportunities for people to think about new forms of business, new modes of doing the past business. And there is no better time than now in a crisis for new businesses to emerge. And I dare say some of our young MBA graduates should play a leadership role. And I'm not even confining this to our university, but also universities across India and around the world.
If I could just reflect, Arjo, I think it's not the end of the world. Secondly, we have come out of recessions, be it 2008 financial recession or the Great Depression or even the 2012 when the Greece, went down. So there have been, stages in our life which we have seen and we have come through those recessions. What I would want to tell the students is, please take this as an opportunity to update and upgrade your skills and be prepared for you to be potentially employable when we're coming out of the situation. I think instead of saying, are we in the recession, I would rather say, I think we are in the time to update and upgrade our skills. Like for example, I would really wanted to say how QS iGauge and QS is encouraging us. During these times, QS has pushed all of us to go into LinkedIn, spend a lot of hours on LinkedIn learning to upgrade new skills. I think these are the times when students should use their opportunity in doing something which they would not have done had they were chasing employment. So we are going to come out of this situation. There are going to be jobs. So prepare yourself, update the skills which you may not have, look at new innovations and creative programs. I think these are the times when students should forget about employment, rather need to see about their own self development. So I would rather want to reassess the situation. Don't chase the employment now. Try and see what are the skills that you need to update. Look at what options you have. Spend a year or two in updating those skills. We will come out of this situation. There will be jobs. You will be employable. This is not the end of the times for all of us. It's just a temporary phenomena that we are going through. And I think it's a good strategy for all of us to realign, see what kind of skills we need to update.
Right.
There has been a lot of studies on this situation, Arya, that whenever there is crisis and recession, universities are great refuge places during this time. People are constantly actually going into universities to advance their knowledge, equip themselves, evolve themselves during this time. So it's a perfect time for not only the undergrad, the high school students, of course, no doubt should go into universities, but also, undergraduates should pursue master's degrees to have specialization. And what to speak about online programs? I mean, we are not too far away from launching an online LLM program, an online MBA program. These new generation programs, I believe, are going to create opportunities for people to pursue education, even if they have already pursued or completed their primary degrees. So in some ways, this recession or pending recession, but also this crisis, should actually enable people to think about how can they better equip themselves for the future.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much for both of you. I have another question, very pertinent one. Abby P asks, will there be more generosity in terms of scholarships from countries such as Australia, UK, New Zealand, which are heavily dependent on international students for their higher education standing? As we all are aware, foreign education or higher education outside of India is prohibitively expensive for a number of Indian students and their families. And a number of Indian students, such as myself and perhaps some others, we've had the opportunity and the luxury to take on scholarships. ABP asks, will there be more generosity this year, given that foreign universities are looking to get in more and more international students? Let me pose this question first to Ashwin.
Yeah, so Abby, I think you have to wait for a while more to see that. I'm confident that not just countries that come out of this pandemic, they would put additional stimulus packages into various industries, and that also includes the education sector. I can see countries like Australia, where education is the second biggest revenue earner for the country. Countries like New Zealand, perhaps in the European Union, we can look at some of the countries. They would offer some incentives for you to go there, but also countries in Asia Pacific, where you probably have never thought about going and studying, like countries like Malaysia, perhaps Singapore, even Hong Kong, might offer such incentives in the future. But looking at it from another angle, cost of living is going to go down as we go through this recession. Housing will become relatively cheaper as we go through this tough times. And I can see that globally, the cost of living will be substantially lower for a period of time before it picks up again. So it is probably a boon for international students, as most of them have deferred their decisions to next year. And by the time you would get into a university, I think it's going to be relatively lower, because there's definitely going to be much more effort being put in by these countries to attract international students.
You see, I want to just give you one perspective, Arya. I don't believe this is going to be the case, at least for the next few years, for a very simple reason. Australia, for example, Australia's income, higher education exports is the second largest to its GDP after mining. United States, for example, if you look at US, almost 35% of US's international students are only from China. And interestingly, one of the data which you mentioned before, and I want to correct that data, is that 750,000 Indian students go abroad, not 200,000. Every year, 750,000 students from India go abroad. This situation has to and will change inevitably, because even the best and the most advanced countries around the world in higher education are facing a major challenge. They have always seen, to a large extent, international education as a revenue earning mechanism. In fact, US universities have something called the in-state and out-of-state. So even a student from, let's say, California going to North Carolina will have a different fee structure. And what to speak about international students? British universities always have a differential fee structure for international students. So You're hearing this from a person who has benefited from international education. I was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, did my master's in Oxford, another master's at Harvard, PhD and doctorate in Hong Kong. And I believe in international education. But right now, the political economy of international education has suffered a significant dent, and its recovery will take time. And that is why, forget scholarships, they are actually trying to manage their existing budgets. And this is not only a crisis that is going to be faced by international universities, Indian universities, including a large number of private universities which are not state dependent, will also be facing different types of crisis. But when it comes to student aspirations and expectations, it's important for students to recognize that unfortunately the next 2 to 3 years, as far as scholarships are concerned for international higher education, they can forget it, and they can actually, and the cost of education in both these countries, be it India versus abroad, is significantly different. The value attached to that education is different. The possibility for employment is lesser. The immigration policies are not going to be favorable. Stay in India, study in India for the next few years.
I absolutely agree with Raj. I just wanted to give you a counterintuitive fact, Arjo. Just because of COVID, if students start expecting scholarships, so let's say we come out of COVID and eventually when they graduate, can we say that you'll not get the job because you got into the institution while you were through the COVID? No, right? The expectation of the students to be employed after the education is the same. So nothing is changing, for them to seriously start expecting that, they have to get a scholarship, because their expectation in terms of employability is still the same, right? So I think we need to keep that in mind. Education is an investment. You cannot devalue the investment that you make because of a COVID-19 situation. And you need to also keep in mind that what you are investing is what is the education you get. What is the education you get is eventually what is going to make you employable. So, these three things are connected. So the idea of employment is not changing because of COVID-19, or the idea of education is not changing because of COVID-19. So if you keep this in mind, I think this argument of, that we need to get the subsidy for education is actually should not be an argument.
And the return on investment in education, because I know some of the questions are also relating to return on investment in education. The ROI in education, at least in India, should be measured not just after a few years of their graduation. It should be measured on the longitudinal dimension of a person's life. The Indian life expectancy is approximately 71 years today. And if an 18-year-old is pursuing education, good quality education, the ROI is not to be measured on what is going to happen in the next 1, 2, 3 years, but for the next 50 years, because that is where the foundations of education that a person receives, that all of us received, has enabled us to do all the other things that we ended up doing in our life.
Right. Well, thank you very much, guys, for that. We have time for one last question before we wrap up. And that question comes from Nitya Jain. It's a JGU specific question. And we talked a lot about student mobility and short-term study abroad programs and dual degrees and semester exchanges. And Nitya asks, will JGU support more movement of students going out into foreign universities in the coming years? So is JGU looking to ramp up its student mobility programs so as to give an opportunity for those students who wanted to go abroad, let's say in 2020, next year, chose to stay back in India and perhaps join JGU? Would they be allowed, or would they be given the opportunities to go abroad for summer abroad programs or semester exchange programs? Raj, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, well, thank you, Nikita, for that question. The answer is an overwhelming yes. We believe in internationalization. We strongly believe what a global education could be transformative for a student. Our partnerships with over 250 universities spread across 55 different countries are growing rapidly, and we intend to expand that to more countries and more universities around the world. We believe in ideas of student exchanges, dual degrees, and short-term study abroad programs. Right now, the only thing that will stop us from doing what we're doing is the international environment, including, international and national level policies with regard to civil aviation, access to countries with regard to, visa restrictions and all of that. You must be aware that, visas to major countries have already been suspended, and one does not know when it will open up. Individual, partner institutions, universities, including in Australia and United States and Europe, have already, suspended many international programs during the COVID crisis. So the only thing that will stop us from doing what we want to do and what we are doing is regulatory and national level policies. But I believe those policies will be temporary, and as I said before, we will sooner than later enter into a post-corona phase, and we are better prepared than many universities to handle that. And our commitment to internationalization is unwavering and is deeply embedded upon the institutional values that we are committed to.
Wonderful. Thank you for that response, Raj. We're almost out of time. And usually in these kind of panel discussions in real life or in webinars, I would have given a vote of thanks. I'm not going to give a vote of thanks. Instead, I'm going to read out a remark made by, it's not a question, it's a remark made by one of our viewers. Aishwarya Krishna says, this is not a question, but just to say a big thank you to each one of you for conducting this informative webinar. This has cleared the doubts inside the minds of so many students. Paddy, Ashwin, Raj, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure it was very, very informative for a number of our students and parents and others who would have joined in. This was the first in terms of a panel discussion that we've done in the webinar format. I'm sure it was very, very informative. If you have any last remarks to make, maybe 30 seconds, now is the good time to make it.
Ashwin, why don't you start? Each of us can say a short remark in 30 seconds.
Right. So I think the situation is evolving. We are all anticipating, and we are all looking at how things are going to change. At this time, while there's nothing to do, my recommendation would be to take up some course. There are several online portals available offering several courses. I think I recommend this to our team as well, and I recommend to every one of you, while you're waiting, while you are idling your time, I think it's good for you to take up something of the sort. If there is anything we could do, if there's any advice you would like from us, our team based in Bangalore, please write into us. We have loads of resources available for reading. If, our websites igage.in and topuniversities.com has so much of resources for students, for parents, for faculty members to read. And we would like to hear from you as well on what are your thoughts. If there's anything we are doing several research projects as well. And I think we have to give the virus its time and respect it, as some of the famous people have said. So let's stay home and stay safe. We still can't predict the future at this time. So that's my final concluding words to everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. Over to you, Paddy.
Yeah, I would just tell the students and parents, I know these are the times, where you need to be more strong. And I think you need to also, I said, right, it's uncertainty which brings the best out of you. I would rather say that we are lucky to be facing these kind of situations, because when we come out, we're going to emerge really strong. I have only read how the Great Depression was, how people, fought the Great Depression, how the influenza pandemic was. But I think, it is going to make all of us more stronger. And eventually, I think, to face situations like this. And I think this should be a learning experience that, these are not the times to be negative about. These are the times to be positive about, and see how you can create that positive energy which will ultimately defeat the COVID-19. I think positivity is the word that I would leave, and I would sign off to all the parents and students. Remain positive, stay safe. Thank you.
Raj, any concluding remarks?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you very much for all the parents and students who joined us in this, and I appreciate all the questions that came up, and we are of course available, offline to respond to some of them. I want to say that I'm very confident that we will overcome this crisis, and quite successfully. And we would have learned a lot. For all the young people who are thinking about the future, you should definitely, go ahead with your plans, and of course, preferably in India, and to be able to pursue your education that you wanted. But I want to leave you with a sobering thought that we are somewhat spoiled in our own life. I include mine as well. And it's important for you and all of us to recognize the privileged life that we live, and to leave a thought for all those people across India and around the world who simply their vulnerability has vastly increased. They have been, further, pushed into poverty and extreme forms of poverty. The children of them have no opportunity to go to any school or college or university. Have a thought for them and feel grateful and feel privileged about how we are placed, and start valuing what we have more than what we might have valued before COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much, Raj. Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you, Paddy. Thank you all for joining us today. We will continue to have more and more webinars, not just on generic topics such as studying abroad or in India during the times of COVID-19, but JGU will continue to have area-specific webinars from time to time. Do check out our website. It's www.jgu.edu.in. We're also very active on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube, as well as on Quora. We hope to see you on campus sooner than later once the lockdown opens up. And stay home, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.